Hello everyone, I'm back, and let me get my cup of tea out of here, let me get my mug of tea. Look, Joe Rogan recently made a quote and a statement. I don't know if it was on his podcast or where it was, but I just saw it recently. So he was talking about Jon Jones, and he was discussing the hate for Jon Jones. And he touched on an area that I think was very interesting, and I want to respond to as a fan and get my belief out there, and hopefully do it in a classy and dignified and entertaining way for everybody else out there. So MMA fans and people who are watching this, really think about what I'm trying to say, really think about what Joe Rogan was trying to say, and I want to hear, because I did this video a few years back, why people, or why you believe people have not warmed to Jon Jones. And Joe Rogan touched on it, and he believed that some of it might be a touch of racism. And he discussed it. I don't know if it was on his podcast. I need to listen to it again. But it was very thought-provoking, because it did make me wonder, is that the part of the reason? Now, in my opinion, it may be. I have not come across a lot of that kind of discussion. Not to say that it doesn't exist. But when I hear the whole Jon Jones discussion from other black people, from white people, from every kind of race in the world and every kind of ethnic minority or ethnic diverse background that I've been around, because I live in a very diverse area, when the topic of Jon Jones comes up, you should hear some of the things that people say, because obviously you get the standard, oh, we find him too cocky, he thinks too much of himself, oh, he's too arrogant. Some people just flat out called him boring, which I don't necessarily agree with. But then I had a discussion with quite a few people, and I realised why some people, or what contributed to why people dislike Jon Jones. Now, I want to just emphasise one thing. I think that Jon Jones is a fantastic fighter. I think he's very skilled, he's very exciting, he's always pulling out new things, and when he fights, I generally just pay attention to what he's doing, because I'm always amazed by the things he does. Now, as a personality, I haven't necessarily warmed to him, and my belief, or why I didn't warm to him, is not too dissimilar to a lot of people I know as it comes from in my area, because a lot of people in my area have the same view, and the view stemmed from this. Let me have a sip. In 2011, and I remember this very, very well, when Jon Jones fought Ryan Bader, and he crushed Ryan Bader, made him look like he didn't even belong in the cage with him, and then he took the fight with Shogun on 6 weeks' notice. That, at that time, was Jon Jones, I think, the peak of his popularity at that point. I'd seen so many fans get on the Jon Jones train, and fans were like, oh my god, this young prodigy is going to get the fight with Shogun, he's going to fight Shogun for the belt, he's going to wreck Shogun. And then he fought Shogun, and he did exactly that. He wrecked Shogun, destroyed him. Shogun Rua, think about that for a second. Shogun Rua, the man that was argued to be the best light heavyweight in the world when he wasn't even the champion back in Pride, and then there was a Pride in the UFC. The man that knocked out Chuck Liddell, the man that it completely unraveled the conundrum that was Lyoto Machida, the man that got in there and he destroyed, and I mean destroyed, Alistair Overeem twice. Shogun Rua, the guy that just wrecked Rampage Jackson. Jon Jones destroyed that man, destroyed him. Shogun didn't get one touch on him. And after that fight happened and Jones won the belt, I will never forget that night, that week, Jon Jones was arguably the most popular MMA fighter in the world at that time. Everybody loved Jon Jones. You even had that story with him stopping a robbery, and he just seemed to be he was on a high at that time. Such a popular fighter. And then the Rashad Evans situation happened. And to me, the stuff that came out of that contributed to why Jon Jones is not as liked as you would think he would be. I mean, he's a young guy, charismatic, good-looking, exciting fighter, speaks very, very well some of the time. And I'm sure that when the Rashad Evans thing happened, and I do know this for a fact, that there were people within the UFC and analysts who thought that the audience would side with Jon and turn on Rashad, because of, Rashad is perceived as cocky and, he can talk good shit and all of that, and Rashad would do that. But when the real story, or when the story came out, and it was discussed, the audience went in the other way. And I do remember that very, very well, that a lot of fans sided with Rashad Evans and did not side with Jon Jones. Because the story from how it goes is that those two were in the same camp together. Rashad was not comfortable with the idea of fighting him. He even discussed going to middleweight at one point or fighting at heavyweight, but he was not comfortable fighting Jon Jones. Rashad obviously had a title shot at the time. He had a knee injury, so he couldn't take the fight. Jon took the fight instead. And then when Jon won the belt, he did an interview that week, actually, saying that he would fight, he basically implying that he would fight Rashad. And he didn't message Rashad or didn't tell Rashad that this interview was coming out. So Rashad found out the same time as everybody else. And that rubbed Rashad the wrong way. It was also said that there was a lot of, if you want to say, cocky behaviour or childish behaviour from Jon in the camps. I don't know how much of that is true. I have heard things from people who are involved in fight camps. I don't know if it's just hearsay or if there's truth to that, but I've always been under the belief if I hear it enough, there has to be something to it. And I reckon there was something to it. But I do remember that when the Rashad Evans thing happened, a lot of fans turned on Jon. It got even worse when he had the injury and he panicked, I think, and then he didn't take the fight. But I don't think that you should really hate the guy for that. I've seen that happen to a lot of people. But when the Rashad situation came out, and when more information about the Rashad Evans situation came out, I think people sided with him even more and became even more opinionated about it. Because you look at it like this. Greg Jackson and the UFC chose Jon Jones. They didn't choose Rashad Evans. Jon Jones was their golden boy. Rashad Evans, when it came out in the primetime special, and I remember this very, very well, and I remember watching this with my two brothers, and they used to like Jon Jones, and then they kind of sided with Rashad as well on this. When you watch the primetime special, it comes across like Rashad was the one who was portrayed, not Jon. It comes across to the viewer that Rashad was the one that lost everything, not Jon. Rashad, didn't he go through a divorce? Rashad had to, sort out all his personal life, because a divorce is not a pretty thing to go through. The paperwork, the arguments, the legal battles, the custody, the payments, the complete change of your life. And then, to add to that, he's now got to leave that camp, or he's going to leave that camp and start from scratch all over again. And I think that fans, when they heard that and saw that, sympathised with Rashad Evans, and everything that Rashad was saying, fans believed and bought into. So when Rashad was telling people Jon's cocky and he's going to have that fall, you wait, he's going to expose himself, fans sided with Rashad when he said those things. And as Rashad started talking more and more, and then that incident happened with the Dan Henderson fight, which I don't think is Jon Jones' fault as much as it is Dan Henderson's. I think it's 50-50, to be honest with you. But I think that the momentum from what happened with Rashad doubled when you had the Dan Henderson thing. Also bear in mind that Jon has done many interviews where he said things and then contradicted himself. Said things and contradicted himself. Said things like, I will never turn down the fans for autographs. I will never ever refuse the fans the autographs. I will never look down on the fans. You should never look down on someone who looks up to you. But then he does an interview saying how he would refuse to sign replica belts, even though George St. Pierre and Dana White do it. And then he's like, oh, they don't deserve it. Why would I do that for them? He says things like that and it rubs people the wrong way. He says things like, oh, I only want the big fights, but then wouldn't take the fight with Chael Sonnen the first time. He says all of these things, then he contradicts himself. And I think that fans, everything that Jon says, I think is under the microscope, because he's the golden boy. And when he says something and then acts in the opposite way, it makes him come off like the villain. And when you watch some of the things he does, I don't think he's too sure of himself in some respects. That's how I see it. Because when he did the whole thing with Daniel Cormier, the brawl for all, where they were in each other's face and they took it to the streets, if you want to call it that, I think that when Jon put that childish Instagram video, which I thought was great for promotional use, Dan, you suck, you fit like a girl, then he took it off and then tried to act like, oh, it was a mistake, and like trying to act that way. That just turned fans against him even more. And I think that is a huge part of it. Joe Rogan, that's how I believe, and that's how I see it. You take the Rashad Evans situation, you take that he's the golden boy, and everything he says is going to be under the microscope, that Jon is going to say things and then act in another way, and you've got all these cases where he has, I think that has been the steady, or the factors that have played into why fans haven't warmed into him as much as you would think. And that's just my belief. Now, do I believe that racism is also an element of it? I think it's a huge possibility. I wouldn't rule it out completely, but I don't think it's the sole reason. I think you really need to understand how audiences are and their psychologies. And when you hear and see things like that, you know, like the Rashad thing, and how some people can relate to that in real life, fans might go in the opposite direction. Anyways, I'm going to stop. Let me know what you think. If this manages to get to Joe Rogan, that would be hilarious. But anyways, guys, I am done. Comment, rate, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Gonna do a video on Alistair Overeem later in the week when I feel a bit more fresher. I'm gonna head out. I need to get ready. I need to get changed, and I will see you all soon. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Bye.